Lovely. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us with that. It's my pleasure to introduce Elaine Mead, the Executive Director, Improvement Care and Compassion, who is also the chair of our Greener Care Special Interest Group. Over to you,
Charlotte,
Elaine.
thanks very much. Thank you. And I know you can't see me, but I hope you can see my presentation. Um, last session today for the innovation stage. So thanks very much for being with us. I thought I'd first introduce you to the Institute's Greener Care Special Interest Group. You might have heard about it, but I wanted to just describe why we've got this special interest group with this focus to look at carbon reduction and sustainability. And it really is a great space to come together and to talk and learn about environmental issues. And I'm really so grateful for all the members and participants for their ongoing enthusiasm. So on the next slide, we've just got an outline of what it is. So I think Charlotte can share that. Thank you so much. It's a quarterly group. We meet actually online, and it's a really open type of meeting. We have practitioners, carers, commercial representatives, we have people from charities, we have managers there. And it's a really wide-ranging agenda that people bring their own expertise or ask about things they want to know more about, and then we'll find an expert for them. So great topics of interest that we've talked about over the last couple of years. So, for example, we had a chat about confidential waste and greening that in healthcare. We had Autumna talking about going green in care homes. We had Grace Care talking about their recycling of aids and pre-loved equipment, which was really interesting. We've even talked about sunscreens and the impact of those on the sea. And we've had presentations about green healthcare routes in primary care. So it's a really open forum, and I'd really love more of you to come and join us if you're interested. We also then add all of our resources to the website, and we'll put some of these links in the chat for you, and you can see it's the Greener Care IHSCM at the top there. But that website has a lot of our recordings and resources, like, for example, a video on the secrets of talking about climate change. So we're really excited about this area. We're keen to do something, and it is actually engaging people in active work around the climate agenda. The next Greener Care Conference is on the 6th of November, and I'll mention that again right at the end from 2 till 4. And we are also developing a Greener Care short courses for you to be able to access that. But to introduce the session this afternoon, I'd like the next slide just to describe why this is so important. So if you could just pop the next slide up for me then, if you would, Charlotte. It's all about climate change, but not solely about climate change. And as we know in health and care, that it is a threat to human well-being and the health of the planet. So this is why we have this call to action. It's shown on this next slide really graphically for me, and you may again have seen this slide or this graphic that shows how much, on the next slide, Charlotte, please, it's getting hotter. Now, every single stripe here is the average temperature against the average for the year since 1850, when the Industrial Revolution started. And so you can see it's getting a lot hotter, demonstrated by those red bars there. And on the next slide, please, you'll see that healthcare actually is a big contributor to climate change. The footprint of healthcare is over 4% of the global total, meaning, quite surprisingly to me, if it were a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter on the planet. And while yet there's no specific or coordinated data around other sorts of care, it's really likely that this wider care sector will have a very similar footprint given the work that we do. So on the next slide, please, it just shows that these changes are something that we're trying to reduce, trying to at least not get any hotter than we are. although sadly we have already just exceeded the 1.5 degrees C compared to pre-industrial levels. So what I want you to think about is it's not just about here and now. It's about what we do in our day-to-day work that impacts around the world and not necessarily just on the climate. So here on the next slide are just some images of the triple planetary crisis: climate, pollution, and biodiversity. And sadly, health and care contributes to all of these sectors, whether it's the power that we use, the electricity and the heat that we generate with those greenhouse gases, or, for example, the single-use plastics and the disposables that we use every day. And we need those, of course, but where do they end up? Or it could be the drugs that we give to people that then end up in the water and impact on the biodiversity. So we have to be careful of not having carbon tunnel vision. And the next slide, just for me, demonstrates how complicated sometimes this is. We can just go back a couple, Charlotte. I wanted to talk, although we talk about net zero, we really need to be careful not to have this narrow vision. And I think, Charlotte, if you could just go back a couple of slides for me. You're going forwards, not backwards.
The environmental impact of vapes. Understanding the unsustainability and possible sustainability of a vape. What are vapes? Most of us know what they are. Vapes, or electronic cigarettes, are devices that heat a liquid to create vapour. They are often used as an alternative to traditional cigarettes. What are your thoughts about vapes? We are going to look more deeply into the Earth's resources that are used in making a vape. Battery waste. Vapes use lithium-ion batteries. What damage do they do? These batteries can leak toxic chemicals into soil and water when not disposed of properly. Plus, mining lithium harms the environment. They can be recycled, as lithium is not an infinite resource. We need to ensure that we keep lithium circular. How do you think mining harms our ecosystem? And where on our Earth is lithium mined? And what are the conditions for the miners there? E-liquid pollution. E-liquids contain chemicals like nicotine and propylene glycol and glycerin. These chemicals can be harmful for wildlife and water sources if not disposed of correctly. They are, of course, harmful to human health. Consider the fact that humans also ingest this. Plastic and metal waste. Look at the Earth's resources used to make vapes. Vape casings are often made from plastic and metals. Plastic and metals take hundreds of years to decompose. Improper disposal leads to land and water pollution, so recycling is very important. What are your thoughts on the littering of vapes? Is this a good use for our Earth's resources? Unsustainable resource use. Materials like lithium, aluminium, and nickel are non-renewable. Extracting these resources damages ecosystems and contributes to climate change. How can we make these Earth resources circular? E-waste accumulation. Vapes add to the growing problem of electronic waste, or e-waste. E-waste contains hazardous materials that can harm the environment. So what are the alternatives? Impact on wildlife. Animals can ingest vape waste, leading to poisoning or even death. Chemicals in e-liquids can also disrupt ecosystems. Humans are also putting all this stuff into their bodies through choice. What are your thoughts on the addiction to these chemicals? So what can we do? And what should we do? We suggest recycle e-waste properly, use rechargeable vapes to reduce battery waste, support regulations for safe disposal of vapes, or just don't vape. It's healthier for you and the earth. So, we know that vapes cause significant environmental damage, they use a variety of our Earth's resources, and making sustainable choices can help reduce this impact. We need to protect our planet together. What are our takeaways from this? Do you have any actions or follow-ups? Thank you for watching. Find us for more on our links below.
Thank you. So this is the image that we often see when we're talking about carbon tunnel. And we want to try and make sure that we look in the wider context. We look at water, we look at health, we look at education, we look at all of those areas. And I'll keep talking, Charlotte, while you're just looking for that next slide, which is something that, interestingly, Carol Dwight calls a growth mindset. It's where we feel that the challenges that we face help us to grow. So we need to try and have that mindset. And for me, that's what innovation's all about. It's a little bit new, it's maybe a bit disruptive, and it makes you think about things in a different way. So as part of this presentation this afternoon, I've got a couple of examples for you that I'd like to share. The first one's in healthcare, and the second one is around something we don't often talk about in this forum, but it's coming from education. So what I'm going to share first is a brand new innovation that has just appeared just yesterday. So if you could go forward for the next slide for me and just skip over that one, Charlotte. Thank you. So just yesterday, I was delighted to see that this document was published. It really is cutting edge. So I think this is going to completely disrupt healthcare. It's a document that's talking now about by 2045, which is very ambitious, to have moved away from single-use medical and technical products into a functioning circular system. Now, what does that actually mean for us? It means in this Design for Life document, things like single-use scissors that we've now become happily using for very many interventions. We'll be thinking about how can we either reduce those, reuse them, or recycle those into something else. It might be using instruments in trays and reducing the number of those in, for example, surgical trays, or reusing some items like those scissors after we decontaminated them. We could even be recycling some of the medtech items, like maybe plastic giving sets, into other materials for other sectors like the construction industry. So Leeds, for example, has used their electrophysiological catheter costs by reducing those by buying remanufactured catheters and selling those catheters back. So for me, this is really interesting. We're going to see real changes. You heard it here first, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. So the next innovation I wanted to share with you on the next slide, Charlotte, please, is one that might not seem, as I've said, so relevant. It's the green agenda, but really aimed at young people. We want to get children engaged early, and this invitation and innovation to bring green into mainstream education is, for those of you that will remember it, the equivalent of Blue Peter for me, where we used to learn everything we needed to know from the TV in the afternoon. And now what we're trying to do is bring this information right back into educational practice. So we might be familiar with STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and maths in the fields that we work in. But STEAM adds the art and creativity to these other subjects. and just another image of it on the next slide, please, Charlotte, is really an idea that we could be thinking much more creatively. And when I was researching for our Greener Care short course, I came across a lovely lady called Louise and the Sustainables Academy. And I'm going to introduce her to you this afternoon. So on the next slide, please, you can see the mission of the Sustainables Academy. I thought their mission actually resonated for us as well. So I was really keen to talk to Louise in a little bit more detail and find out a little bit more about the work they're doing in schools, trying to bring the green agenda front and central to not as a special subject, but into everything that we do. On the next slide, please, Charlotte, it shows some of the characters and turned into video resources for teachers that they use to integrate this into the agenda and the curriculum. And to tell us more, I'll just introduce on the last slide, Charlotte, please, Louise, who I recorded this fireside chat with just last week. Now, Louise is a lifelong educator. She has an MSc in Educational Leadership from Leicester University, qualified teacher status from Derby, and a Bachelor of Education in Early Childhood Development and Education from Nottingham. She's held many head teacher and principal roles, both here and abroad. And Louise lives and works from Scotland and is part of the University of Aberdeen School of Education and leads this really interesting Sustainables Academy. So I caught up with her for her to tell me a little bit more about that and have some of her ideas about greening education. So here's our chat now on video about sustainability. Louise, just a chat today, if we may, about your work. And I wondered if we could start with you telling us a little bit about your interest in environmental issues as an educator.
So I think it's all to do with my life in general, the way that you live your life, and that we are custodians and, as I tout, stewards of our environment. And it's really important as a parent, as an educator, that we're laying the foundations and improving the foundations for the future. We've done quite a lot of damage so far, and we're on a pretty bad trajectory, and we need to alter this. And what I am really interested in is the fact that we need to be positive. We need to have a positive outlook. I was brought up in a very rural environment. I've worked in city environments. I've worked in the centre of Jakarta, very, very busy city, very polluted. And yeah, I have huge concerns about our world, and education, I believe, is the way forward and the way to embrace everybody, families, friends, young people, and to empower our young people.
Start with them early, I think, sounds the right thing, Louise. So from your vast educational experience, you saw there was a gap here, something to start to look at, which clearly isn't just about climate change, it's wider than that. And I know you have a particular interest in triple planetary crisis. So why was that?
One of the issues for me was that there's an awful lot of talk. There's conferences, people travel all over the world. There's COP in 2 weeks' time again. Mm-hmm. We've got departments for education across the world having discussions about their curriculum, and there's nothing actually happening much on the ground. And our teachers and our educators are incredibly willing and are very, very keen to have resources to be able to teach in this field. And they realise as they work with their children and live in the environments that they can have an impact. So there's a lot of enthusiasm out there. There are gaps. I know that governments and the United Nations, they've got a greening curriculum coming out. I think it's a greening curriculum model coming out. But these are generic, and we need to tailor So that's the reason why I decided, you know, I can sit here and wait, or I can sit here and do something. So that's what we have done. We've created 12 pathways for circular economy and sustainability, and that's a generic model. And then what we've done is, or beginning to do, is tailor those to different curriculum around the world, so that if you're in the US and you're teaching national grade science, you can teach sustainability and circular economy. If you're in the Highlands in Scotland, you can take curriculum for excellence, and you can find a sustainability and circular economy curriculum model to suit your teaching.
Fantastic. So this is primarily for teachers, but of course our members will be really interested as parents as well. So I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit more about the resources and those fantastic characters I can see behind you, and then maybe I'll ask you whether it's possible for parents to access the resources. But let's start with the idea and the sustainable characters I see behind you. Can you tell us a little bit more about where they came from and how you use those in your resources?
Yeah, so I suppose it's influenced very much by my own children and how they get attracted by belonging to my son and daughter. Two of my children were particularly interested in Pokemon cards, and they loved the characters, and they could rattle off the characters and what they did and what their superpowers were and how they engaged with each other. And so I thought, right, okay, let's take this into the sustainability and circular economy field. So what I must admit, my children now are in their late 20s and 30s, so not particularly interested now, but these characters are very relatable, and children, we did some little bit of research on how the children felt about the characters. We've tried to be quite eclectic with gender and race and abilities, so that young people and adults can identify with them. Each of the characters own a resource. So we've got Aqua for water, obviously. We've got Shatter for glass. We've got Mets for metal. You can see behind me. You can see Plasto for plastics and polymers. I'm going to dash over the other side. And we've got the two professors, the Professor S and Dr. Raven. We've also got other characters that have joined this team since. So we're working on our energy ones. We have A-Ray for solar and Turby for turbines, just to name a couple of them. So these are the characters that the young people can identify with. It also means that it gives a purpose within the classroom. A lot of schools have house groups. So they have eco-school committees, they have rights and respect in schools, United Nations awards that they're doing, and each of our characters that can be part of that, and the young people can identify with them. The other thing is that we want this to trickle into home. So this is where it works with families, and we've got a parent portal on the site, and we're gathering more and more resources there. I mean, anybody can actually register us for our site. We have a registration just because we want to be able to see who is accessing. So we do have homeschoolers, we do have parents, we do have teachers. So it's not exclusively for schools. So parents can have a look, they can download bits and pieces. By keeping a parent portal, I think that will be better, because the children won't be repeating what they're doing at school. And if you're just using it for, a holiday activity at home, then it doesn't cross into what is happening in the school environment, because we want it to be fresh and exciting. But by having the characters, the children can identify with the earth resources that each of these earth stewards represents. And the young people can then share those with their families. They can have their favorites. We've produced, I think we've just called them trump cards, because I think there's a copyright but it's that idea where you have a card which explains about the character and their powers, and it's all not for profits. Everything's free. Everything you can download and access if you wish.
Well, that's fantastic, Louise. I was really inspired when I was looking at your resources, and so great for those to be free resources for teachers to be able to use in the classroom. I particularly identify as a water steward with Aqua, so I think if you had to have a favourite, that one's for me. But let me just ask you a little bit about the overlap then, before we talk a bit more about the resources. A number of our members will have come from backgrounds in science, based in science, and I'm really interested because I saw a lot of your resources on the Sustainables Academy were making that leap from what we previously called STEM subjects, that science, we had technology, engineering and maths, into STEAM subjects where you've included arts. And I wondered if you thought that was, clearly you do think that's important, but why do you think that's important?
I think because what we need to do is remember that in each of the STEM subjects, there is a creativity. There is a creativity and imagination. I mean, we always pick on Einstein, but Einstein, you know, he was an innovator. He was creative. His brain was so exciting because he was having those artistic visions in his head. And the other thing is that there's noticing. Noticing is something that is very, very key at the moment, and being able to notice within your environment, notice within your industry, noticing within your community, and particularly with care, you need to notice what is going around you, and you have to have an open mind. So if we push out the A from STEAM and don't include it, we're actually pushing out a whole section of our learning community. And having that innovation and that artistry and that creativity is incredibly important. And having the visual, I mean, our characters are born out of a very talented Scottish illustrator and designer from Pitlochry. You know, he has created these for us, and you know that the way that art plays a part in capturing and sending our message is important, but equally with the way that we look at nature and the artistry in nature and the design in nature. It's, you know, we should look at Fibonacci, for example, numbers in nature, shape in nature, all these aspects. They're all pulled into our curriculum and pulled into teachers when they are designing their curriculum. So I think the A is incredibly important, and I think that the A gives the empathy aspect of, and I think that's really important as well, to have that empathy for our environment, our community, our learners and our friends and families.
I can hear your passion, Louise. It's fantastic. So tell me a little bit more about the actual resources then. I'm going to encourage at the end of this people to come and have a look at your site. So we'll give people the link. But what age group are these really tailored for, these resources?
The whole
and what are they?
Right, so the whole curriculum is the basis is the curriculum, because I wanted to have something that flowed from 3 to 18 that was progressive for sustainability and circular economy. Because I was actually talking to somebody in a technical college who was teaching a building subject, and saying that a lot of the resources that we have, they're using with their students because they have no background in this area, particularly in his field, and he was very excited that we were producing this progressive curriculum. The curriculum model itself, it started linked with Curriculum for Excellence, because that is very much about experiences and the outcomes for the learners. So we, excuse me, I wrote that. You know, it was designed to marry with that curriculum. The other thing is that teachers, they respond to their cohorts and their classes and their learners. and the experiences they've already had. So what I didn't want, we do have lesson plans on the website. I mean, personally, from being a head teacher and a teacher, I can pick up somebody else's lesson plan, but I will make it mine. And I will make it mine for those children as well. But what I wanted to do was have something which would be a resource where a teacher could go in and say, right, okay, I can plan my learning for my young people from this resource. It's not a resource where we hand it over and say, go away and teach this, because what I want to do is engage the educators into being critical thinkers as well. So we've got a professional learning section where we've looked at the different theories of learning. We've created sort of like sound bites for excuse me, we're taking, for instance, Bloom's taxonomy and linked that to teaching sustainability. So the theories of learning are there, teaching and learning are there for the teachers. The other resources, some of them are hands-on, some of them are just ideas, some of them are big questions, so that we're starting young people thinking about and questioning. Some of them are true and false games. We've got a YouTube with information videos. We're actually altering some of those so that they become pause videos, so you can use those as a complete teaching tool. So it's supposed to be a set of tools for an educator. The question you asked me about age band, I did say it's 3 to 18. We have focused on developing primary at the moment, because I believe, as with talking to the technology teacher, that we need to start at the very beginning and make it progressive all the way through. So the aim is, so we've got early years activities. So I don't know if anybody knows about tough trays. These are great big black trays that you see in a classroom, which are hands-on play resources. And so we've created ideas for early years settings and on sustainability and circular economy. I actually had someone say to me, don't be ridiculous, you can't teach 3-year-olds about circular economy. But through learning through play, children can experience the circular economy and start to bring in that vocabulary and change what they do in their lives.
That's fascinating. So I know, again, you're passionate about the circular economy. So tell me how you introduce children to that.
Well, it's all about understanding the cycles. And nature is, first of all, we always start with the biosphere, understanding our biosphere, because everything that we have within our biosphere is all that we have, whether it's water, whether it's lithium, whether it's aluminium, whether it's potash to make glass. There's an interesting book out about materials. I can't think of the title of it. It's listed on the website, about sand. And everybody goes, oh, well, we've got no worry with sand. Well, actually we have, because there's certain types of sand can only be used for certain types of things. So I was reading within this book about the type of glass that's was used for lenses in binoculars during the First World War. And we were actually selling sand back to Germany for them to make lenses for sights in guns, which is a bit terrible. But anyway, it's just an example of that we take for granted that we have beaches, but we actually have so many limited resources. And so the idea is that we understand the resources within our biosphere, and we understand that they can be finite, but we need to make them infinite. And we need to look at all aspects of all the products we use. And my biggest thing is that we use less. We use less. And the other thing is that we use less virgin things. So we use less virgin aluminium, less virgin glass, less virgin plastic, and we keep those within the cycle. And my biggest dream is that we have It's a great manufacturing potential for our country, for us to be completely recycling and manufacturing within our own communities instead of shipping it across the world and having polyester recycled and then remade into garments and sent back to us. It seems we need to cut that section out, reducing the carbon.
Absolutely. And of course, we're guilty in health and social care of using a lot of stuff, Louise, and then wasting a lot of stuff. So it is an area we're trying to get into as well. How can we become less linear in our thinking and our business model to make health and social care more sustainable, maximising the use of those natural resources and not wasting them, which is what I'm afraid we have to admit we do quite a lot at the moment.
I mean, it's interesting because health and social care are one of the biggest users of plastics and disposable plastics. And there are some plastics that immediately need to be incinerated because of the nature of them. But being able to, if those plastics remain circular, it's not a problem because it's going back round. And you're producing the same item again and again and again. And there's an interesting video about, I think if you look at the life of a yogurt pot on YouTube, it takes the yogurt pot, shows the yogurt being eaten, the yogurt pot being broken down, going through a process, and then being made back into a yogurt pot.
Wow.
And then the yogurt's put back into it and the lid's popped back on it. So it's a complete circle for that particular yogurt pot. So I think we can do that with all our products.
Well, we're definitely having to look at that in healthcare, as you can imagine. So there were a couple of other areas I wanted to talk to you about, if I may, Louise. And the first one is your interest in actually eco-anxiety, and I know you've done some really good work on this on your websites, because sometimes people are worried about talking to children and young people about these issues because they don't want to tip them into eco-anxiety. But I think you've looked at this. You shared a word with me a phrase with me I hadn't heard before, which was eco-hope, that I really love. But I wonder if you can give us some thoughts about that.
It really actually was born out of the team behind me, because they give hope. It's about eco solutions. And what I felt was that there was an awful lot of aggression. There's a lot of aggression. There's a lot of war going on in our world as it is. And the phrase eco warrior really quite disturbed me, because I thought, well, hang on a minute, let's stop battling. Let's stop this aggressive approach. Let's look at being stewardship and caring. And so when I was going into schools, it was interesting that one of the aspects of following the rights and respect in schools from the United Nations is to encourage children to understand what is going on. They've got the right to know what's going on in the world and understand that world. So many schools get their children to watch Newsround, which is an absolutely fantastic resource. And for generations, we've enjoyed. You and I probably remember John Craven, an important fact. That was where he first sort of came into my mind when I was watching news as a child. And it's important for our young people to be exposed to the news. But when you see children sitting in a classroom with their fingers in their ears and their eyes closed because they don't want to hear anymore, it suddenly makes you feel there's something wrong. So I started to look around, and there's some very good resources out there, books that have just started to be written about climate anxiety. And what I wanted to do was look at climate anxiety and try and shift the thinking so that we were looking in a positive way of how we could improve our world, but also to start dealing with this issue of climate anxiety and to look at those positive phrases. So eco hope is something that's really important. Knowing that that a tiny little thing can make a difference, but also that we can look at the big things that are happening in the world and feel more positive. So what I've put on, we've created a few resources to use in the classroom. We're on the website, we've got some sound bites again to look at what anxiety is. I was actually listening to Radio 4 a few months ago about consolidation, desolation. And so I've had a look at those two words and given sort of like practical definitions to those. And we have a piece on there on how to talk to your child about climate anxiety. We've also picked out a lot of picture books and stories. I found we've curated YouTube videos. There's some beautiful there's some wonderful mini short cartoons, animated short tells like a 5-minute story they're beautifully created, and it's about bringing that positivity to the world. So we can't ignore climate anxiety. The health and well-being section of the curriculum in Scotland helps us to address that, and so what we have got is that strand within the curriculum as well. So yeah, within the parent portal there's bits and pieces that you can look at.
That's fantastic. Thank you. A really important area. So you've made the link for me to my last question, actually, Louise, which is about the videos that you have online. You link in through your website or direct on YouTube. And there was a very interesting area, very topical at the moment in healthcare, about young people and the use of vapes. And I was fascinated when I watched your video. It's only short, and I'm hoping we can play it for our members in a little while. But you've taken a very different line and angle than maybe we would do in health, which is telling people why it's really bad for them. I just wonder if you could talk about that and where that came from before maybe we can play the video a bit later on for people.
Yes, so partly it's a personal thing. I've one of my boys who continues to vape, and we were talking. As a non-smoker and a non-drinker here, you know, very, my only vice is chocolate, I'd say. I was very keen that the vaping stopped, and I was thinking about I wasn't having much impact on him. And I was watching on the health side, you know, a sort of a shrug of the shoulders and off we go. And then the other thing was that I was noticing as I was walking through the streets, I was actually in Glasgow, that I was seeing loads of detritus really from vaping just laying in the streets. And I was thinking, what goes through someone's head when they vape and then throw these bits and pieces on the floor and just dump them on the way? Then I was also thinking about the types of materials that are used in those vapes. So there's metals, there's chemicals, there's plastics. So this is a resource that is a bunch of resources that are just dumped on the floor, and then they go into a bin and they're probably in a landfill. So we're talking about leaching of plastics, we're talking waste of metals, we're talking about batteries. You know, all this stuff is in landfills. So I thought, well, maybe if we look at the approach of the environment, our young people might be more interested because they're very concerned about the environment. They know that impacts them in the future overall, and even if they don't care about at this moment in time what they're ingesting into their system, they might actually start thinking about the environment. So we took the vape and looked at all the earth resources that are in the vaping apparatus, and created a video to reflect on the environment and our earth resources.
It really does take a very different angle, and I'd be interested in your views about whether you might find that interesting to discuss with younger people. So I think today, if you could take down the video, Charlotte, I'll just thank you for spending some time with us. We're right at 15:55, so thank you so much for spending your time with us this afternoon. I hope that I've challenged your thinking a little bit. I hope I've shared some innovations around greener care with you. And we will, as always, share all of the resources that we've touched on, that we've talked with Louise about, and put those all into our greener special interest group resource website. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and have a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you.